Hello and welcome to this Healthy Dynamic Life workshop on the real goal of yoga. My name is Lexi Tavares. I'll be your teacher today, and be sure to stick around till the end of this video where I reveal some amazing aspects of yoga that I know you're really going to want to find out. The purpose of this workshop is to address the question, what is the real goal of yoga? Why do yoga? And to start, we're going to talk about what the common perceptions are, or what the goals of yoga. When I did a quick Google search, yoga goals, or what are the goals of yoga? What is the goal of yoga? What showed up were many different things all across the spectrum. So, for example, one author listed to increase flexibility, to improve strength and build endurance, to get stronger bones, to regulate your emotions, to build balance, to reduce stress and anxiety, to strengthen the mind, promote more positive thinking, to learn pranayama or breathing, to create a healthy diet, to have a consistent practice in life, to increase meditation time, to connect with community, to do some self-study. Some other authors said healing, self-realization, to attain happiness, to attain enlightenment or samadhi. And another author even said that the yoga poses are not the goal. Becoming flexible is not the goal. So while one author said it is a goal, the other one said it's not. Standing on your hands is not the goal. The goal is to create space where you once felt stuck, to unveil the layers of protection you have built around the heart, to appreciate your body and become aware of the mind and all the noise it creates, to make peace with who you are. And so this author believes that the goal is ultimately to love yourself. And when you come onto your mat, the goal is not to accomplish something, a pose. The goal is to shift your focus in order to grow your heart. So there's a lot going on out there on the internet when we search what is the goal of yoga. It can be overwhelming, and maybe one of these goals resonates with you, and that's what initially brings you to your mat or to a class or to this workshop. And for me, I know I was initially drawn to yoga for the physical aspect. So if that's what's attracting you to start or continue your practice, that's fine in acknowledging that. I totally respect and appreciate all of the inner guidance and the reasons that bring us on a path. Now, once we're here, I think that we're opened up to a whole other experience, or an opportunity to experience a new way of life, a new way of living, a new way of striving, and maybe a shift in what our goals once initially were. So, where can we really find out what the goal of yoga is? Yoga is an ancient tradition over 5,000 years old, which started in India. We can't exactly go back in time and ask the people who were starting this practice and were practicing, but we do have an amazing resource that is still available to us today, one of the ancient texts called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, depending on who you ask, some people say Patanjali was indeed a person, a guru, who would orally teach these lessons about life and this experience and about yoga to his students, and the students would write down the lessons, and that's what became the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Other teachers have told me that Patanjali might not be a specific individual, and it doesn't really matter what exactly happened. I think what's really cool is accepting this blessing of having this text to guide our way in knowing what the goal of yoga is. And so today we are going to use the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali to answer this question: what is the goal of yoga? Why do yoga? So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali was initially written in Sanskrit, and since then it's been translated into English and I presume many other languages as well. And there are many different translations of the same text. So for example, this is one of the translations here, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, as interpreted by Mukunda Stiles. Now there are so many other translations as well, for example, by Mr. Iyengar himself, etc. And so what's really cool, in my opinion, is that by reading many different interpretations of the Yoga Sutras, I feel like I'm able to get a more in-depth perspective or approach to what the initial text meant. And what I like about this book is that at the end, each verse, each line is broken down by Sanskrit word and then the translation. So it's really, really cool. If you don't have a copy of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali yet, I highly recommend that you pick up a copy at your library or get a book for yourself. It's really, really awesome. And it's one of those books that you can keep coming back to, keep referencing, and get something out of it continually. So the very first line, the book is divided into 4 chapters or 4 books and then into verses or lines. So the very first chapter, Samadhi Pada, meaning on being absorbed in spirit. So the very first line, the way it's written is 1.1. With great respect and love, now the blessings of yoga instruction are offered. How warming is that? Another translation is, now the exposition of yoga is being made. So this first line is really an introduction of the book, like ladies and gentlemen presenting the instructions of yoga, letting us know that, hey, this book is going to help you understand what it means to become a yogi, a yoga practitioner, and what it takes to practice. In fact, one of the quotes by Pattabhi Joy is, yoga is 99% practice and 1% theory. So here we go, the Yoga Sutras. So the very next line of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali basically sums up the purpose of yoga. All the other sutras are explaining this one sutra. So this right here, right in the beginning of this text, is helping us understand why yoga, why practice yoga. What is the purpose? What is the goal? Are you ready? I feel like this elicits a drum roll. Well, one translation of Sutra 1.2 is the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. So being a human being, perhaps you've noticed that there can be a lot of activity with the mind stuff, thinking thoughts, feeling emotions, feeling the connection of those to the body and manifesting into the world. It can be a lot, and a lot of times it can produce a variety of results, maybe positive, maybe negative, maybe neutral. At the same time, it can lead to a lot of suffering because we have desire and we want things to go a certain way and they go another way, and then we think about things, we judge them, we assume things, blah, it's a lot. So the restraint or the control of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. Pretty cool. So maybe you thought it was about getting that handstand, but after all, we're moving in a little bit of a different direction. So another translation that I really like is yoga is experienced in that mind which has ceased to identify itself with its vacillating waves of perception. I'm going to read it one more time. Yoga is experienced in that mind which has ceased to identify with the vacillating waves of perception. So, yoga is really just to get us to control the mind chatter, the modifications of the mind stuff, the vacillations of the mind. And, if you can control the mind ripples, then you will experience yoga. Then you will experience that union, that peacefulness. And, whether we're conscious of it or not, I think a lot of us are somewhere deep inside of us striving or interested in or aware of that goal inherently, whether it's been through a specific religious organized avenue or just practicing spiritual rituals or journaling or thinking about it, having this feeling of wanting to be at peace. So we're going to talk quickly about the different parts of the mind. So chitta is the sum total of the mind, right? The mind parts. Ahamkara is the ego or the I feeling, the feeling that there's an I who has needs. The buddhai, which is the intellect or discriminative part of the mind, the one that can assess. And manas is the describing part of the mind, which is attracted to outside things and has desires, right? Like, I want that. So any part of the mind that is disturbed is called chitta vritti. And the whole point of identifying these parts of the mind and labeling a condition as having a disturbed mind is because the reality of what is always the same. So what is just is. What happens is that our thoughts and our attitude about how we see what is, that is the vacillations of our mind, right? That's what we project onto what is. So we can all be looking at what is, and we can all be having different perceptions. Maybe that's happened with you, having a discussion with a family member or a friend or a coworker or someone you just met, and you're looking at the same situation and you have completely different opinions or perceptions or judgments. The thing that is, it just is. But how we perceive it, what we think about it, what we judge about it, how we feel about it, is our projection. So when we control our mind, then we're free, right? There's nothing else in this world to bind us to suffering. So if we harness the power of the mind and we can control the chitta vrittis, that's yoga. So doing yoga asana, doing pranayama, doing meditation, that in itself isn't the goal, but that is the vehicle to getting us to control the mind, to control the vacillations of the mind. So that's why yoga isn't necessarily about changing the world, it's about changing our inner world. A really cool way I like to imagine or visualize Sutra 1-2 is like a lake. Whenever we have thoughts about how the world should be, how it should be different, or all the things that are wrong with our lives, this is like throwing a rock into the lake. The ripples that result from the rock hitting the lake will continue for quite some time, before the lake finally returns to stillness again. So if our mind and if our life is full of storms and wind and rocks being thrown into our lake that is our existence, the surface of the water is going to be choppy. Now, it should be stated that there's nothing wrong or bad about a choppy lake, just as there is nothing wrong or bad about someone who is experiencing emotions that come with experiences like a heartbreak or pride. However, when the lake is able to be calm, we are able to look into that lake and come to learn of our true reflection, to see what's actually there. So by calming the fluctuations of the mind, we come to more deeply learn of who we really are beneath it all. And that leads us perfectly into Sutra 1.3, right? So 1.2, we talked about yoga is the cessation of the modifications of the mind stuff. And Patanjali says in 1.3 that when this happens, then the seer is revealed, resting in his own essential nature, and one realizes the true self. Another translation, then the seer abides in his own true nature. So once the mind is crystal clear, we begin to perceive the world, the objects in the world, what is, as it is. Our perception is no longer distorted. And we realize that through which I perceive, I am the seer. I'm not this body. I am not this mind. I'm not the thoughts about what I see. I am the seer. I am that which sees or that which knows. So the reality is that the reality was always clear. It was always clear. It was the mind, or it is the mind, that gets in the way and leads the seer to see it in a mixed up way. So the point here again, bringing it all back, is that by making the mind clear, one goes back to one's original state, that which is able to realize one's true self and rest in one's essential nature. That's so cool, right? So even if we've experienced, anxiety or depression or worry or fearful thoughts or selfish thoughts or guilty thoughts or even crazy ecstatic thoughts, this little sutra right here is a gift in reminding us, hey, that's not who you are. And just by getting the mind clear, one can return to one's original state and rest in one's true nature. So that is like the key to unlock this amazing goal. So that leads us into Yoga Sutra 1.4, which articulates the opposite. At all other times, the self appears to assume the form of the thought's vacillations, and the true self is lost. Or at all other times, the self appears to assume the forms of the mental modifications. So this is like that famous quote, I think, therefore I am. So how do we identify in this world? Well, we have a lot of practice identifying as labels, right? I am Lexi. I am a woman. I am a yoga teacher. I am a health coach. I am a daughter, I am a partner, I am a dancer. But that's not who I really am. I am the seer of this experience, not the labels, not the identifications. So when I'm able to detach myself from all of those labels and identifications and like kind of shed them off or erase them, it's like a whiteboard. You have all these labels written on with your marker and you just erase it all, that's who you really are. That's the true I. So when we realize that we are the pure I, we see that everything is connected, everything is spirit, everything is in union, in unity, and that's, remember what yoga means, is to yoke or union. So hopefully this is starting to come together for you, that the real goal of yoga is to be who we really are, union, and without all the false perception stuff. In Sutra 1.5, Patanjali tells us the vacillations are of 5 types, which may be either painful or not painful. So what is all this modification of the mind? What is all this mind stuff? There are 5 kinds, and they can either be painful or not painful. All right, so let's find out what they are. In Sutra 1.6, he says that the 5 vacillations are right knowledge or correct perception, misconception, imagination or verbal delusion, sleep, and memory. So let's start with the direct perception or correct knowledge, which he talks about in the next Sutra 1.7. The sources of correct understanding are direct perception, inference, and revelation derived from reflections on the scriptures or from testimony of one who knows. So the 3 things that allow us to get right knowledge are direct perception, meaning you see something yourself with your very own eyes and then you believe it to be true. Like I saw a branch fall from a tree and is now on the ground. I saw that and I believe that it is true. An inference is you see something that leads you to believe that it is so. So for example, I see a branch on the ground and I infer, I believe that it fell from the tree. And then the last type is scriptural testimony, such as the Yoga Sutras, right? I either directly read the Yoga Sutras or I hear testimony of someone who's an expert in it. So it's important to really do our best to listen and interpret these sutras or any text directly for yourself, because there can be so many interpretations and things can get lost in translation. And in general, to really discern and not try to follow anyone blindly, not even me, because we must sort out what is and what is a vacillation of the mind. So that's through constant practice of retraining the mind. So I think that's what I want to say about Sutra 1.7. 1.8 is about misconception. Misconception is when knowledge of something is not based on its true form, and when knowledge is founded on an unreliable appearance that doesn't have inherent integrity. So an example that my teacher taught was you see something across the room in the corner and you think it's a snake, but really it's just a coiled up rope. So there's a false understanding of what's actually going on. That's a misconception, right? Versus direct perception. Sometimes we think we're directly perceiving something. We saw it with our own eyes, but it's a misconception. So that's something to be aware of. Sutra 1.9, imagination is a fluctuating knowledge created by relying upon the sound of language alone, and the words are empty of objective truth. So we hear words, we hear sounds, and then we visualize, we imagine what that word means, but that is a verbal delusion. We hear something like rock. And I picture a rock and I believe it's real, but it's not. It's just a sound. So that's another thing to be aware of, that, wow, there's a lot more mental modifications and stuff than I might have initially realized. And it can either be painful or painless. But the point is to clear the mind, control the mind, and then we can return to that state of peace and union. Woohoo! It's good news. Sutra 110, sleep. Sleep is another form of a modification of the mind, and that is a vacillation of, dependent on the absence of mindfulness. So it's the absence of mindfulness, or it's the cognition of nothingness. And so sleep is a mental modification because during sleep, we are dreaming. We are still having thoughts and experiencing those thoughts. That's a mental modification. And then Sutra 111, memory is a vacillation of knowledge created by not allowing the objects of sensory experience to escape, meaning an object previously experienced and not forgotten is coming back to consciousness. That's memory. So an experience creates an impression in the mind and then comes to surface later as a memory. Dreams are memories. Daydreams are memories. And memories may be accurate or maybe not. And what happens when we are experiencing memories is that we are not present to the present moment and of what actually is. We are recalling something that may or may not even be true. So that is a mental modification that could be painful. Maybe not, but it's not cleared of the mind. So you're like, I was like, I have all these mental modifications, all this opportunity to have pain, or maybe it doesn't have pain, but it's still not my true self. I'm not being my true self. So what can I even do about this? Here is what we can do about this in Yoga Sutra 112. These mental modifications are restrained by practice and non-attachment. So the more we practice restraining these mental modifications, the more we're able to control them. It's just like practicing hitting a baseball. The more we do it, the more chances we have to actually hit the ball. So in Yoga Sutra 113, Patanjali says, of these two, practice is the continuous struggle to become firmly established in the stable state of the true self, or effort toward steadiness of the mind is practice. It's associated with effort. So continuous practice enables us to eventually come to that clear mind. and you know, it's not just, oh, I'm going to do it on Monday and Friday. Oh, and then I'm good. I got it. It's a continuous practice. Like always, we are going to become so watchful of every thought, every act, and be able to do that forever. And it's cool because then we are putting ourselves in a state of having a clear mind and being our true selves. And that's the point. So we really want to constantly be thinking about this. And here we go to Yoga Sutra 114. Practice becomes firmly grounded when we are well attended to it for a long time without break and in all earnestness. So that's what I'm saying here, is that the practice is doing it for a long time. Give your practice your full attention, because it's essential for our yogic success. It's the goal of all goals. And so it's really exciting. It can be a little bit scary, like, oh my goodness, I have to practice this all the time forever. Well, release that I have to, I should, right? That's another mental modification, like, that could cause pain or anxiety or suffering. So just let it go and come back to patience, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and peace. Really come back to clearing the mind, and it is what it is. So we talked about practice. Non-attachment was the other vehicle that he mentioned. And so non-attachment is when we free ourselves from craving for objects seen or heard about. So before, or maybe even after, you realize you're attached to something, it could be a belief or a desire, just take a pause, stop and think about if it's something you're going to want your mind to grasp onto. So if I have the thought, oh, I could never achieve that, just pause. Is that a belief I really want to be attached to? Just let it go. A way that I heard non-attachment described is like a Teflon pan, a non-stick pan. Just, if a thought arises like that, just notice it and let it slide off. So using non-attachment as a practice, that is a way for us to control our minds so that we can have peace and rest. And that is really the goal of the whole thing of yoga, right? If our mind is still full of desires and cravings, it won't be able to rest, right? Ooh, I really want a pizza. Pizza would make me feel really good. Oh my God, I can't do anything until I get this pizza. My mind is full of desire and it's causing me distress. So if I am able to notice, oh, I have a craving for pizza, and then just not get attached to that craving, just let it slide off like a Teflon pan, then I'm giving my mind the opportunity to find rest. So non-attachment isn't doing nothing or having no drive. It's just not being attached to personal desires. And I've been practicing that this week. Like, ooh, today would be a great day for a bike ride or a hike or a swim. Those would all be nice, but I'm also open to whatever happens that day. If I don't go for a bike ride, I'm not going to let myself suffer as a result of that. So those are the Yoga Sutras that articulate what the goal is, what's in the way of achieving the goal, those mind modifications, and then the two options we have, the two vehicles we have to get there: practice and non-attachment. And in the rest of the Yoga Sutras, for the purposes of this workshop, that's all we have time for today. But in the rest of the sutras, Patanjali goes into exactly how to do the practice to get to samadhi, which he goes into in detail, enlightenment. And it's super, super duper exciting. If you are interested in learning more about yoga, health, wellness, creating peace and contentedness, and being your true self, definitely subscribe to this channel. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what your biggest takeaway was from this workshop. What was your aha moment? I would love to know. And thank you so much for attending today's workshop. I feel really honored and grateful to share with you some things that I've learned on my journey, and I wish you a happy, healthy, and dynamic day. Namaste. Bye.